Hi everyone, Sam here, otherwise known as FPL Pricey. Today we're going to take a look at my team selection ahead of Game Week 11, but just as a quick recap, let's take a look at how the team performed in Game Week 10. So 64 points, a small red arrow down to 695k, just inside the top 700k from what was 570k. So it's not a nightmare, it wasn't a big red arrow, but obviously having two big green arrows before this week, it was a little bit frustrating not to continue the upwards trend there. The highlights around the side include Matty Cash getting that 5-pointer. Doesn't seem like a lot, but obviously he got taken off just before Aston Villa conceded, so got away with that one a little bit. Udogie didn't make the starting lineup for Spurs, didn't even make the bench, so it meant that I ended up with double West Ham defence with Aguerd coming off my bench. I think that's probably an issue I want to sort moving forwards. I don't have much confidence in having double West Ham defence in any game week, and even though that he would normally be my fourth defender, I think I probably need to correct that one. Moving forward, Salah got the goal against Nottingham Forest, 8-pointer double to 16 for me as my captain. I never really considered anyone else as my captain this week, and maybe I should have had a closer look at the likes of Son or Haaland or even Saka, but it's easy to say that after the fact and in hindsight. At the time, I was pretty confident in Mo Salah, did get the goal, was fairly fortunate to get it, but again, we take those and we move on. Son getting the 10-pointer was also fairly fortunate. Obviously, nothing fortunate about the goal, but he wasn't going to be getting any bonus points until Palace scored that late goal, and that wiped the clean sheet from all the Spurs defenders. Obviously, I didn't have a Spurs defender because Udogie wasn't playing, so that helped me, and then it also meant that the bonus points were reallocated to people like Heung-min Son, who scored what was, in the end, technically the winning goal. So 10 points from him. Saka got fairly fortunate with an assist, and that matched the player that I sold, which was James Maddison. So 6 points for both of them. So not up or down from that transaction. And then the only other return in the side was Erling Haaland. Now, Erling Haaland obviously could have been a good captain shout away at Man United, but overall, I did fancy Mo Salah ahead of him, so I'm not going to get too hung up on that. Haaland obviously is looking like a fantastic option for this game week. So for now, let's move along from game week 10 and take a look at how I'm setting up for game week 11. So starting off in goal and in the defence, Areola keeps his place. Away at Brentford, I'm not massively confident in a clean sheet there whatsoever, but hopefully I can get a couple of save points. And realistically, in a straight shootout between Areola away at Brentford and Turner at home to Aston Villa, who are scoring bags of goals at the moment, and Turner, I'm not even sure keeps his place after that performance against Liverpool. I think it's a pretty easy decision to start Areola and just hope that West Ham can pull it out of the bag. Obviously, last night in the Carabao Cup, they beat Arsenal, so fingers crossed that they're coming into a little bit more form now. So Areola away at Brentford, I think, is probably the better of the two picks there. In defence, I'm going with a back three again. Cash against Nottingham Forest away from home. No questions there. He's still a great asset. Hopefully he doesn't get taken off too early this week, but I still back him for a clean sheet this week. Hopefully that comes through. And as always, he's pretty decent on the underlying attacking data too. So if you can get any sort of attacking return, that's fantastic. Udogie, hopefully he's fit again for this week. I think the turnaround between Monday and Friday for game week 9 into 10 was just a little bit too close for him. Hopefully, and all the signals are that he'll be back for this game week. So Chelsea at home isn't a great game. Obviously, Chelsea are a pretty decent side, but they're not scoring bags and bags of goals at the moment. And Udogie always does have the chance of some sort of attacking return as well, which I think is better than starting Dan Burn at home to Arsenal. Arsenal, again, haven't been like at their full pomp so far this season, but I still think that they're good for a goal or two away at Newcastle, and Dan Burn's attacking upside just isn't there. And I feel like out of the two, I prefer to start Udogie. Let me know in the comments what you would do out of those two. Maybe it's better to start Dan Burn and have that Newcastle defensive coverage for obviously quite a high-owned Trippier. But I think overall, in terms of sheer points, I think that I'd expect more out of Udogie this week. So that's where I'm going at the moment. But as you can see, and any of you that tune in week on week, there is a new player in my starting lineup, and it does mean I've actually made an early transfer this week, and that is to get in Tsimikas for Aguerd. I mentioned in the previous section that I wasn't really enjoying having that double West Ham defence. Even if one of them was always on the bench, I didn't really fancy them as a backup option to have if injury strikes like it did last week. Whereas Tsimikas, at around the same price, he was 0.1 more. I did have that in the bank as well, luckily. I still felt that that was enough of an upside move that I was confident, and I knew that that was the move I was going to make this week. If anything else shifted, I would have been priced out. So I decided to act early this week. I've still got an extra free transfer ready if I need to move again, but hopefully that's all I need to do this week. And Tsimikas in the starting lineup against Luton away from home, I think is a far better player to have than either Aguerd away at Brentford or Dan Burn at home to Arsenal. So fingers crossed that pays dividends. He's got some good fixtures coming up as well. And to be completely honest, Tsimikas is extremely good value for money for what is a pretty decent defence, and he's got attacking upside as well. He's on some set pieces and he does get forward quite a bit too. So I think overall there's not really much against making that move. I'm a little bit concerned I did it early just in case we hear anything in the press conferences, but I've still got that extra free transfer to bail me out if anything else arises. So that's a move I've made so far. Let me know in the comments what you think of the defence and what you think of that move. Going early especially, let me know if you agree or disagree with that one. So moving into midfield, and nothing is changing here as it stands anyway this week, and it's 5 again across the midfield, starting off with Mo Salah. I think he is a good captaincy option this week. However, we all know that Man City go up against Bournemouth, and for any of you that have Erling Haaland, I just fundamentally think that he's more likely to score a greater amount of points at home to Bournemouth than Salah is away at Luton. Now, don't get me wrong, if Haaland didn't exist or I didn't have him in my side, I'd be extremely comfortable with captaining Mo Salah. Luton is a fantastic game. Even if it is away from home, Luton are conceding a lot of chances in wide areas at the moment. So anyone who's captaining Mo Salah this week, do not worry. I'm sure that that is going to be a fantastic game for him and for Liverpool in general. However, I do think that Haaland in central areas at home to Bournemouth, he's fantastic at home, and Bournemouth are just not a great defensive side at the moment. So I'm more than happy to throw the armband on him instead. We'll discuss Erling Haaland in particular more in just a moment's time. But moving across the midfield, Son at home to Chelsea. I've mentioned the Chelsea game a little bit already with a doggy. I don't think it's a great game for Tottenham. Chelsea are a good side, even if the sheer points in the league table don't really match up to that at the moment. I've still got faith that Chelsea are actually a decent side this season, and the underlying data suggests that they will eventually correct the little errors that are leading to them maybe missing out on some points that are on the table in some of these matches. However, Son against Chelsea I don't think is a bad pick. I'm happy to carry him through some slightly less than ideal fixtures because he's just that explosive, he's that attacking, and all he really needs is a goal, and all of a sudden we're looking at potentially a double-digit haul. So Son playing out of position, he's still under 10 million. I think he's probably likely to be one of the 3 top scorers in the whole game this season. So I want to hold on to him. He might get 2 or 3 blanks in a row, but then explode with a hat-trick. That's just the sort of player he is. And I think he's going to want to try and aim for the Golden Boot this season. Probably not going to get there with the likes of Salah and Haaland ahead of him. But still, he's a competitive guy. He's going to want to score a lot of goals. And if Tottenham are going to score this weekend against Chelsea, which, let's face it, is pretty likely that they're going to get 1 or 2 anyway, regardless of the strength of the opposition, I think Son is the most likely to be getting those goals. So I'm more than happy to own him, not just for this week, but for the weeks ahead, just considering how explosive he is as an asset. Moving across, Bukayo Saka, again, this fixture isn't ideal. Newcastle away from home. Newcastle at home are a very good defence, and they usually win their games at home. So it's a bit of a fortress. Arsenal might struggle there, but again, this is the one fixture that Arsenal have that isn't looking ideal in the next patch of fixtures. And I bought him last week ahead of Sheffield United at home. Obviously only got the assist, but with the fixtures after this game week, especially Burnley in game week 12, I wanted to own him for the next stretch. So there's no way that I'm not going to be happy to just start him in this game week. He is fairly likely to get something out of it as well. So despite the fact that Newcastle were a good defence, I'm more than happy to just own him for this fixture. And then after this, hopefully it will start to pay dividends. Jarrod Bowen, again, West Ham have been flattering to deceive in the league a little bit recently, but they did win in the Carabao Cup, and hopefully that will prove as a bit of a catalyst for them in the league. And against Brentford away from home, Brentford aren't the tightest defence in the world. I think the underlying data is fairly good so far this season, but still, Jarrod Bowen should have a good enough opportunity. He's getting one big chance a game at the moment, and you'd back him to bury it more often than not. So if he gets that extra big chance this game week as well, I'd still back him to score a goal, maybe even bag a little bit more than that as well if we're lucky. So I think that he's absolutely fine to hold. I think there are people out there that are looking at selling him, but the fixtures for me are still too good. I'm very wary of over-managing my side at the moment and getting rid of a player before they get to the good fixtures and start actually hauling. And Bowen just seems like one of those players at the moment that I'm happy to give an extra week or two on. And hopefully, as long as no other really exceptional assets pop up around that price point, I can hold on to him for a few weeks and that will pay dividends for me. The final player is Anthony Gordon, and he is walking maybe a little bit of a tightrope. He played good minutes in the Carabao Cup last night up front while Callum Wilson got his rest. They did swap over, so Callum Wilson did come on, and that does hopefully mean that Gordon has a good chance of still starting this weekend. I still think he will start, and Newcastle, with all their injury worries at the moment, I think they can't really afford not to start a player like him when he's been performing really well so far this season. But the underlying data is gradually reducing for him. It's getting slightly worse at the moment, but it's still around 0.5 XGI per 90, which is still great, especially for an asset of his price. I still think he's great value for money, and unless I had absolutely no fires to put out elsewhere, I'm pretty happy to hold him. Next week it's Bournemouth away, and after that I think it's Chelsea and Man United at home. I'm not particularly scared of either of those fixtures. But if there are other assets that I can get to, then maybe I would consider it. However, overall, I'm really happy with this 5 across my midfield. There's no way I'm making a transfer this week in that midfield unless injury strikes. But maybe in the weeks ahead, there are 1 or 2 positions I could think about shifting across. Anthony Gordon and Jarrod Bowen might be the most likely of those 5 to go. But as I mentioned, for the time being, I don't really think either of them are definite sells, and I'm happy to hold them for the next few game weeks. So moving into the forward line, and Ollie Watkins may have blanked for the first time in what feels like forever over the weekend in game week 10, but any of you that watched the match probably aren't too worried about his performance overall. He was extremely unlucky not to get not only just 1 return, but maybe 2 or 3 in that game. And I think that he's still in and around the areas that you want to see your centre forward in. And the returns will come. I think it was just one of those games. It didn't quite fall for him. He got a little bit unlucky with a few chances. I really wouldn't panic about owning him at the moment, especially when the next fixture up is a fairly struggling Nottingham Forest side. They're not the worst side, obviously. There are plenty of other teams that you could target much, much better than Nottingham Forest at the moment. But I still think Nottingham Forest are a side that you can probably be fairly comfortable owning attackers in. And Watkins is in a patch of form where he could score against anyone. I think even away from home, obviously Forest are much better at home. I still think that Ollie Watkins is absolutely fine to hold, and he's going nowhere in my side this game week. So finally, taking a look at Erling Haaland, who is my captain this week. Obviously, Mo Salah is still a good captaincy option away at Luton, as I mentioned earlier, but I do think the standout option is Erling Haaland at home to Bournemouth. And for all of you non-Haaland owners out there, this is probably the one week that you've not been looking forward to. And Bournemouth at home is a fantastic fixture. I would get the temptation to bin your strategy and take -4s, -8s to get him in just to captain him for this week. However, I would urge caution. I would say that this is the one week that Haaland is the standout option. And even this week, when he is a fantastic captaincy option, Salah is still an absolutely fine option for captaincy away at Luton. So I don't think that anyone out there without Erling Haaland should be ripping apart their teams and taking -4s, -8s to bring him in. Presumably, your strategy was built around the idea that over a stretch of games, you can outscore the Haaland teams by having more value elsewhere in your side. So I wouldn't just let one bad game week get in the way of that. However, for those of us who do still have Erling Haaland, like myself, I think that this is the week that you will have been very excited about. Obviously, he can score against anyone. I don't think anyone out there is expecting him to blank week in, week out, even with some slightly poorer fixtures. But this really is the good fixture. At home to Bournemouth, you'd expect him to be getting a pretty decent bag of returns in this game in particular. And his effective ownership will be pretty high as well. I'd expect it to be over 150%, whereas Mo Salah I'd expect to be around 100%, maybe 110%. If you only own him and not captain him, for example, you're probably losing out on about 10% of his points, whereas with Erling Haaland in particular, if you don't own him at all, you're losing out not just on all of the points he scores, but then also you have to factor in all the captainers. So that will take it to around 150% EO. So you'd have to actually times whatever points he gets by 1.5 to figure out how much damage he's doing to your rank. So this is the one week where I think anyone without Haaland is probably a little bit worried. But by all means, I wouldn't rip apart your strategy. This is 1 week. The season is long. And your strategy presumably was that you can outscore the Haaland teams over a run of games. So abandoning that strategy now probably isn't a prudent move. So I would just stay the course and maybe find a little bit of a sofa to hide behind in this game week in particular. But good luck out there if you're going with that strategy. Hopefully it pays off over the run. But this week in particular, I am hoping, especially as my captain, Haaland does get a big haul. Looking at my bench, there's not really much to talk about this week. Maybe the bench order could be shifted. I think the key component here is the fact that I've got Dan Burn at first sub at the moment against Arsenal. Some people might even be starting Dan Burn this week against Arsenal at home just to cover off the Trippier points in the Newcastle defence. However, I do think fundamentally all three of my defenders are better value this game week in particular. And when you look at my bench, I've also got Taylor as my third sub at the moment, who has a very good fixture at home to Crystal Palace, who are struggling to score goals at the moment. So maybe there's an argument that I could be looking at bringing Taylor forward a little bit and having him as first or second sub. However, I don't think I really back Burnley to keep a clean sheet against anyone at the moment. So I think overall, I'm still pretty happy to have him buried at third sub. But do let me know in the comments if you would change the bench order or maybe even start the likes of Dan Burn or Taylor ahead of someone I've got in my starting lineup this game week. So there you have it. That's my team selection ahead of game week 11. One transfer already made, so do let me know in the comments below what you think of that transfer. And as always, if you've got any of your own dilemmas, please do leave them in the comments below and I'll try to get back to all of them and answer as many as possible before the game week 11 deadline. In the meantime, if you could leave a like and subscribe to the channel, that would be greatly appreciated. Not only does it mean that you won't miss out on any future content, but it also really helps me in growing the channel and reaching as many people as possible. However, for now, I wish you all the best ahead of game week 11 and I'll see you as we start preparing for game week 12 next week.